right. So I'm with Richard Woods, and he's a longtime catamaran designer, and in fact designed the boat that my family sailed around the world on. So we're appreciative of that. We had a really good time on it, and he's been designing for a very long time. I guess you'd say you go back to sort of the fathers of catamaran design in a lot of ways, with Kelsall and James Wharram, correct? Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. And you've designed more boats than you can recall, and most of them in the 8 to 45 foot range. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about who Richard Woods is and how you ended up in catamaran design.
Yeah, lots of people ask me that, and it's really difficult to answer because it's been my life, and I think it was the fault of my father when I was about 5 years old, and he built me a little catamaran to sail, as sort of basically a toy boat back in the late 1950s. So and since then I've never wanted anything else except catamarans. And so then I was a dinghy sailor, and I did sail monohulls until the mid 1970s, and that's when I became a yacht designer and started working with James Wharram. So that was my first sailing in catamarans offshore, was in the mid 1970s, and then I sailed across the Atlantic on Wharram's Tahini in 1978. So that was my first crossing, and then I've done 4 more since then, on one of my boats. And I did the Cape Town to Rio race, so that was the South Atlantic rather than the North Atlantic. And then lots of other sailing. And as you know, since we met in Vancouver, I've sailed a lot on the US. In fact, we've anchored in every state in the USA,
Oh, cool.
Apart from the ones in the Great Lakes. And we were on our way down from Juneau when we met you in Vancouver. And we've been all the way down to the Baja, Mexico. And we've done a lot of cruising in the Bahamas. We've done a dozen trips across the Gulf Stream, something like that, in a lot of different boats. And I'm one of the few people who design boats, but also sail them. And not only that, but sail a lot of other people's boats. So out of those 5 Atlantic crossings, only 1 was to my design. And there was 1 monohull and the 4 catamarans. And then I've done a lot of racing and cruising on trimarans as well.
So with all your experience on different boats, I'm thinking you started with the Wharrams, which are a very traditional Polynesian style boat. And then boats have changed a lot. So tell me a little bit about what innovations you've seen in catamaran design in that time, and which innovations you enjoy. You can also tell me which ones you think are not awesome, but what have you seen?
Well, it's interesting. The first time I did the intercoastal waterway up and down on the east coast of the States was in 1998. And I was doing it by myself, going up to the Annapolis Boat Show. And so going up and back, I saw 1 other multi-hull. And now you go out and you see dozens a day. And one of the things that's a big change, obviously, has been the charter boats. Because again, when I was in the Caribbean, whenever that was, 40 years ago, and I was working on charter boats, and they were all monohulls, or sort of the pirate ship day charter boats. And now the vast majority are catamarans. And I remember I used to go out and row out to every multi-hull that came in
Right.
to talk to them, and you would never do that now. So the big change has been in charter boats, for sure. And that's influenced a lot of people because it's basically the only catamarans that most people know are either Hobie cats or big charter cat. And in fact, so the boats that people actually want to cruise are not charter boats, and they're not Hobie cats. And so, but the market is charter boat driven, so it's very hard to find a boat, as you know from your own experience, that is a good cruising boat for a family rather than a charter boat. And I always say it's, you live in the house, you don't live in a hotel. You don't go into your house is set up how you want it, not a Hilton foyer. And you don't go, when you go on a charter boat, because I've worked on charter boats, I've designed charter boats, I've built charter boats, and I've even chartered a chartered catamaran. And you come in and you go for 2 weeks holiday with your family or friends, and you tend to eat out, you tend to only sail during the daytime, stop every night, do other stuff, and that's not at all. And you've got your 2 weeks, so you go sailing. And whereas when you're living on board, most of the time you're not sailing, you're living on board, aren't you? And so it's very difficult for people to realize there is another group of multi-hulls, which used to be the big group, but has now become the small group, which is the liveaboard cruisers. And so a lot of sort of education is needed to make people realize there's a lot of different types of multi-hull, the same as there's lots of different types of monohull. You don't compare a long keel, heavy displacement monohull with the Vendée boats going around the world at the moment. And yet a lot of people associate Ostar trimaran with I don't know, Leopard 45s.
So what would you consider some of the ideal characteristics of a liveaboard cruising boat? I know mine, but the fact that our boat went to wind well was constantly shocking to people, that we could hold our own as a 40-foot catamaran alongside 45, 50-foot monohulls. We could point just as well. We usually got everywhere quicker if the wind was light. We definitely got there a day or two ahead of a lot of people, but even our Pacific crossing, we left with 12 boats, and we got there the same time as all the big boats. So that was important to us, but what would you say some of the really important characteristics are?
Well, what I always tell people when they're looking at boats is check the bridge deck clearance. Now, you never had that as a problem because you had a very high bridge deck clearance. But as you know, lots of boats have very low clearance. And I did a delivery years ago, not one of my boats, but from the England down to the Canaries, which is, I don't know, 1,800 miles. We stopped once, but you could not put anything on the saloon table when you were sailing because it just got thrown off. And that was a 43-foot catamaran. And a lot of the smaller boats, they're even worse because they tend to get loaded down more. And that's really horrible. No one wants to sail on the boat with a bridge deck slam. You probably haven't really experienced it unless you sailed on a lot.
Yeah, even on our boat, I think we had it happen once, and it just had to be the wrong combination of waves, and it was a rather shocking experience. I believe an orange went flying, but that was about it for us. So so that's the main thing. And then even if you're choosing one charter boat over another, that's the main factor. And then, as I was saying,
Storage space is a major thing because you're living on board, you're going to have an awful lot. The last boat we took to the Bahamas, that was ours, was a 28-foot boat. And people were amazed. And we only ever saw 2 boats smaller than us. And they'd say, well, you can't have anything. And we'd say, well, we've got a bicycle, and we've got a kayak, and we've got a sewing machine, and we've got 3 computers, and we've got enough stuff to repair the boats. And we got this, and we got that. We've got a rigid sailing dinghy on board. And people, and they say, well, where? And we say, in the lockers. I mean, apart from the sailing dinghy, which was obviously on davits at the back, right. But everything else was stowed away. So they had no idea. As you see lots of boats with fuel cans tied to the lifelines and just junk because they haven't got anywhere to put anything.
That is about, we loved our big lockers on the catamaran. We always had to be very careful of weight, which is, but I don't think that's a terrible thing either. We live a little bit of a lighter footprint in the world if we don't buy everything we see. So you talked about the size of boats. That's one thing we noticed. The first time we went cruising, we were on a 28-foot boat. It was a monohull, but it wasn't an atypical size for a boat. This time we were on a 40-foot catamaran, and we were definitely the small boat in the fleet. So do you feel that's driven by charters as well, because people think they need all that space?
Yeah. You were saying about the size of boats. Lots of people have ideas of what they need, or rather what they want. And I say, well, you get what you need. And it's the same with buying houses. You buy a 5-bedroom house in case the grandchildren come. Whereas, and you buy a 50-foot catamaran in case the grandchildren come. But the difference is that with a bigger boat, you cannot, for example, pull the anchor up if the anchor winch doesn't work. You can't do it manually. And you have much more complicated boats. And so again, as I say, if you don't know how to fix your washing machine yourself, do you really want one on the boat? And there's so many people who get stuck in port because they've got a complicated boat they can't repair. And if you have a smaller boat and a simpler boat, and normally that often means an older boat as well, you can usually manage to get the anchor up. You can sail off the anchor. You can pick up a mooring without not being able to hold it. And one of the other things that always amazes me, and another of the things I always say is, can your mother get on board?
That's a lovely thought.
Can your mother get on board your boat? It's got such high freeboard, and even tied to the dock, can she do it? And then it also works the other way around, is that you and your spouse are maybe in your late 50s. Can you leap off the boat when it's coming alongside to tie it up? Or do you always need someone to come and help you? And a lot of the boats, you need someone to come and help you. And you know from that sometimes you have to come in at 2 o'clock in the morning and it's pouring with rain and you've just got in before a gale and you're got to tie up in a harbour you've never seen before and maybe to a stone wall or something, and you've got to do it. And the bigger the boats are really difficult to do. And we've done that working at boat shows. I remember one time years ago, there was a Fontaine Pajot 50 came in, and it took 8 of us who were all experienced multi-hull people to get it into the dock because they could not do it by themselves, even though there were 4 of them on board. And again, they were delivery crew used it from Fontaine Pajot. Mm-hmm. And the smaller boats are just easier all round. And the smaller the boat, the more you sail. The bigger boats, it's too much bother to pull up the mainsail, so you motor everywhere. And there's a lot of boats that you see chartering where they unroll the jib and they don't pull the mainsail up. And I would think that maybe half the charter boats, half the charters are where people never hoisted the mainsail at all. And they just motor everywhere. And that's why car catamarans are far more popular now than they used to be.
Okay, yeah. I was thinking power catamarans have become more popular, but that'll have to be the next conversation because this has been great, but we're out of time, even though I have another half dozen questions. But thank you.
I'd ramble.
Yes. Well, thank you.